Alright, welcome back to another how-to video. The main goal of this video is not to show you how to make a plaster mold of a plastic lure. The goal really is to show you the new way I've come to start using clear coat and finishing or sealing my my plaster molds. So if you already pour your plaster molds and you just want to see how I finish them or add the clear coat finish to it and seal it, go ahead and go to this time that you see on the video now. If you're not familiar with my channel and you haven't seen how I pour my plaster molds, you can continue watching from here and watch all the way through. So when I'm making my molds, I use just the regular plaster of Paris that you can get at any home improvement store when I'm making my first mold. So if I don't know what a mold or a lure is going to look like or what it's going to perform like in the water, I'll use the basic stuff that you can get at I think this is DAP plaster. There's a whole bunch of other different plaster of Parises that you can get. But the problem with it is it's fairly brittle, so it can chip easily if you're not careful, or if you shake it or a little bit, it could break. So once you get comfortable with it and you've made a duplicate or a lure that you really like and you want to make more and more of them, I suggest using Perfect Cast, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But you can get that on Amazon, and Perfect Cast is actually up to 5 times stronger than this regular plaster. So use that one because it's much more durable, less brittle, less cracking, less flaking off, and it's a much more long-term solution to plaster molds than this regular stuff. But for the sake of this video, again, because the goal is just to show you how I seal or finish my plaster mold, I'm going to use this stuff, and I'm going to make a mold of this little guy right here. When you're using plaster, and if you haven't used it in the past, or if you're not as comfortable with it, definitely follow the instructions on the container or bag, whatever you bought or whatever you're using, to see the proper water to plaster mixture ratio. But in my case, I've used it a lot, so I just pour and stir and mix until I get the desired consistency that I want. As far as what I use for my mold base or my structure, I use Legos. That way I can make it whatever length, width, height that I want to. Just get a package of as many of these Legos. These are the 2x4 or 2x8 pieces, and then below, just to seal it on the bottom, I just use just strong duct tape. So without further ado, let's get started on this part. So this is just base powder right here, and I start by just adding a little bit of water at a time and mixing that thoroughly. And what I'm looking for is a very fluid, not to where it's runny like this is too runny. So as it mixes in, you want it basically like a really thin peanut butter, to where it's not dripping, but it's definitely fluid. And you may be wondering, okay, why, if you've seen other videos, a lot of others will take their lure that they're trying to mold and glue it to the bottom. I don't like to do that, because once you pour this plaster on top, you have no idea what that tail's doing or what the rest of the body is doing. If it's floating up, if it came unstuck from the bottom, whatever. I just don't like doing it. I like to be able to see exactly what's going on. So I pour the plaster first, and then I set this in, so it allows me to know and see exactly what the tail's doing, what the body's doing, know exactly what's going on with it. I know it's not floating up, and basically I can see everything that's happening, so I know exactly what that cavity, when it says done and dried, well, I know exactly what that cavity looks like. It's going to be an exact mirror image or a mirror duplicate of exactly what you're casting. Again, if you put it on the bottom, you have no idea if that's going to float up. You have no idea what's happening around it. If there's air bubbles, no idea. So you could ruin it real quick and go through a lot of plaster. So this is kind of a way, when you put it on top, it's kind of a way to really make sure that you're not going to waste plaster and have to start all over. And so in here right now, it's a pretty good consistency. You can see the bubbles coming up. And I'll shake this in a little bit as soon as I make sure that I get all the clumps off the bottom, around the sides. Again, you don't want it really runny, you don't want it to drip, you just want it to be able to flow around this lure that you're going to mold around. Okay, so that looks pretty good right now. I'm going to go ahead and take this stir stick out, and I kind of bump this container down on the workbench a bit to get these bubbles out as much as possible. And then what I'm going to do, as soon as right before I'm ready to pour, I'm just going to kind of blow in there. Just kind of blow all those bubbles out. Okay, much better. All right, so now I'll go ahead and pour this in. Okay. And just from experience and knowing how much plaster I need for certain lures, so that's a 3-inch one. I know I need about a cup of plaster powder in order to make the mold as deep as I need it to be in this size of a mold container that you see with the Legos. Okay, so set that aside. Make sure that right after you place this lure in here and get it all set that you go rinse that out, otherwise it's going to be a pain in the rear end to clean that out once it hardens and sets. So now again, I'll go ahead and get this settled in, get as many of the air bubbles out as possible. Alright, that looks good enough. There's a few more in there, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. They're not going to affect it. Alright, now, so for placing the plaster or placing the lure, I'm going to do tail first, right? So if you look at the shape of this, oh, here, I'll set it down here. See the shape of this? It kind of sticks out just a little bit, right? So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to let that drop in. Okay. Once that drops in, right, then I'm going to just let the rest of it sit and slowly put that down. Slowly push that down. And when you see spaces like this, yeah, there's a space in there, make sure you get that plaster pushed all the way up in there. Okay. Alright, that looks pretty darn good. And it's okay if plaster gets on the top of the lure. You're gonna pull it out. It's gonna pull out anyway, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Alright, that's all good. Now, on the package it'll say let sit for probably 35-45 minutes. I let it sit for about an hour and a half. There's no reason not to let it sit for longer. You could probably even let it go for 5, 6, 7 hours. It really doesn't matter, because that plastic lure or that rubber, that plastisol isn't going to stick in there. You'll be able to take a screwdriver and pull it out no matter how long it sits in there. So I'll let that sit and come back when it's ready to remove out from the plaster mold. Okay, hold tight. All right, it's been about actually close to 2 hours. Let's go ahead and take this thing out and take a look at what we got. First, I'm gonna go ahead and take the duct tape off. All right, I'm gonna take this. I recommend taking one side of Legos off to make it easier and chip less. And then, yeah, again, it'll chip less if you can just take them off piece by piece. Okay, I'll just open that up just a little bit, slide the mold right out. There it is, not quite solid as a rock, but good enough. Now I'll go ahead and take a small screwdriver here, kind of, let's get whatever was on there, don't know what that was. Okay, go ahead and just take the screwdriver, kind of pull this up, comes right out. Okay, there you go. That mold so far looks perfect. No hole, no big bubble holes, no nothing. We'll go ahead and smooth this out a little bit right here. Okay, And you see little overlaps here where you see the shadows. I'm just kind of get rid of those, smooth that out a little bit. Okay, same thing on this side. Anything over here? Little one right here on the tail. Not too bad at all. That's it. Alright, mold is done. Now, I mean, technically if you wanted to seal this right now, you could. But there's a lot of moisture in this still, so what I do typically is you can do one of two things. One, you could let this sit for 1 or 2 days, let that moisture evaporate out of this. Or what I do is I have a separate dehydrator that I use for, like, when I make jerky or dried fruit chips, whatever. So I have a dehydrator that I'll put down to around 90 to 100 degrees and run this in there for probably 6 to 8 hours. If it's really humid where you live, or there's a lot of moisture with storms or whatnot, recommend you doing probably about up to 12 hours. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the dehydrator, let it go for, again, probably 6 to 8, maybe 10 hours. And next time you see, it'll be ready to put the clear or the seal coat on this. But all in all, it turned out really clean, really well. No issues, no problems on it. So it should be a very clean mold to finish. Back in a bit. Alright, here we go. Mold's all, at least for the most part, all dehydrated. It's been sitting in the dehydrator for about 8 to 10 hours total. So it's all ready to rock and roll and get sealed with the clear coat. So here we go. What I've been using is this Gorilla Glue. It's the epoxy, sets in 5 minutes to clear stuff. So I'll go ahead and this is a 1-to-1. So you can see it has 2 tubes here. One's the resin, one's the hardener. So I'll go ahead and take this lid off. You can see the bubbles kind of come out of there. You want to make sure to get the bubbles out on both sides and then squeeze evenly. Again, with it being a 1-to-1, that want to make sure you get it all out at an even proportion. Alright, and then once you're done, just kind of pull this black tube back, get the air bubble back into the this main top piece, so that way you don't lose any resin. And then just go ahead and put the lid back on. Let's go, buddy. Back on. There you go. Alright, and then I just take a screwdriver. You can take whatever you want, and I just mix it for about a minute, minute and a half, or 2 minutes, just depending on how cool it is outside. If you got a lot of moisture, a lot of humidity, I would mix it quite a bit. Just mix it more. But you just want to make sure that it's completely mixed 1-to-1. Because the worst thing that you want to do is not mix this thoroughly, because when you go to put this on the mold, if it's not mixed completely perfect, it's still going to be soft. It's not going to harden and cure properly, and pretty much screw up the mold. And go ahead and keep this getting stirred in. And then I just take a paintbrush, get a good amount on there. Remember, you can always take some off after you put it in and add more. So be generous on the first coat when the first time you do it, because you can, like I said, you can always pull some off. It's not going to ruin, as long as you put on a thin coat, it's not going to ruin the mold itself. So I put it on the outside a little bit here, so that way if there's any over pour, it comes off pretty easily. Make sure that when you're doing this, you have a thin brush, so that way you can get all the way in this tail, right? Got to make sure you get this entire tail all the way down at the bottom. You can see it's a little white piece right there. That means the resin hasn't gone onto that. So you want to make sure you get all of that, every bit of it, every little nook and cranny. And if you've done the mixture right on the plaster, don't have to worry about it chipping while doing this. It'll be perfectly fine. Make sure to get this little part of the tail in there, not only all the way down but the back piece. Make sure you get your resin on that paintbrush pretty good and get it in there. And once you're sure you've coated every piece or every little millimeter of the mold, or of the cavity, I should say, then you can go in and kind of remove a little bit, or just take the excess off. Alright, so I just kind of brushed off some of the resin. Now I'm going to go in here and just kind of smooth it out. Getting any excess out. You only want a thin layer. Okay. If you do want to keep the paintbrush, make sure to have acetone. You can get that at, Lowe's or Home Depot or any home improvement store. Get some acetone so you can dip this into the acetone and mix it around and get all the resin off of it. Okay. Excellent. So that's that. We'll let that sit. Again, it says dries or sets clear in 5 minutes, but I usually let it go for about a day just to let it completely cure. You don't want to be in a rush on this, so I'll let this cure for about a day. Come back and we'll do a test pour on it and see how it turns out. Back in a bit. All right, here we go. So I got the mold. It's all cured. Resin's all cured. It is ready to go. So I've got some old like dark blue or turquoise, whatever, leftover plastic. I'm gonna go ahead and heat this up just to do this as a sample. So when I'm heating up already cool plastic, I'm just gonna go ahead and put that in for 1.5 minutes and see what that looks like. All right, here's the first 1.5 minutes. See how this looks. Starting to get there. Put it in for another 30 seconds. Come back and see how it looks. Alright. Oh, and while you're melting plastic or lead, make sure you have ample ventilation wherever you're at, or a mask or something. I have a fan going, so I don't have to have my mask on right now, but if I wasn't filming, I'd have a mask so I didn't have to worry about the fumes. But there you go. Alright, so it's almost there. You need to go probably another 30 to 45 seconds more. I want it to be really, really fluid. So I'll go ahead and put it in. There it is. Alright, I'm back. Couldn't take it with all the fumes, so alright, it's back. So as you see, it poured in really smoothly, of course, and then pulled out of that cavity just fine. You could see how shiny it keeps it by having that resin in there. If you didn't have resin in there and you just let it be and poured the plastic in there, it's going to be really dull. But yeah, see how easy that came out? No problems at all. It didn't stick. Resin. That's why I use this stuff now. Works amazing. That's all there is to it. Got your Gorilla Glue epoxy sets in 5 minutes clear formula. That's it. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. But yeah, that's how I finish it now. Epoxy 5 minutes set clear. You go get some.